Yeah, the topic for today is that we will be discussing the subject of environment. This subject has now become globally significant, and today the whole world is discussing, and it is also part of the curriculum, and the students need to know this subject in its proper perspective. People living in the past, before the Industrial Revolution, in all the countries of the world in different ecosystems, they always lived in harmony with nature. The people were respecting the limits of nature, and they were organizing their lifestyle and their activity respecting the limits of nature. This is very important because during the Industrial Revolution, what happened is that humanity came to be empowered with lot of techniques, and with the help of these techniques, the capacity of the individual increased by leaps and bounds. And that over a period of time, particularly the Europeans, where the revolution began, they became so powerful and they became so very confident about themselves that they started looking upon nature as something to be conquered and dominated upon. This attitude of the Europeans, because of the Industrial Revolution, it resulted in several other activities which can be described as being injurious to nature. First of all, it resulted in industrialization in a very big way. Secondly, as and how the industry started going into production, they needed lot of raw materials, and they also needed markets. Therefore, they went upon what came to be subsequently described as colonialism. That is, they went about colonizing large areas of the world, and the focus then was in search of raw materials and in search of markets. After this, what we see is a picture. What happened in Europe slowly began to manifest in the United States of America. America had all the advantages of a very vast expanse of area with rich natural resources, and an enlightened, educated community from Europe. They migrated there, and they started, colonizing America. Immediately, they went in for urbanization, industrialization. As a result, the American growth was fantastic. It was very fast, but it was taking a very, very heavy toll of natural environment. Over a period of time, particularly in the 20th century, the First World War, followed by the League of Nations, then the Second World War. The failure of the League of Nations resulted in Second World War. And after the Second World War, we come to the United Nations, a wonderful organization which came into being to protect the planet Earth and also to ensure that no more world wars would ever take place. It was at this particular juncture that Americans, particularly the American universities, they started becoming responsive to the problems faced by the planet Earth. Lot of research was going on in the very many universities there, and one advantage about the American universities is that they have lot of funds, and these funds are given by their almanac, their own students, when they leave the university, when they settle down in life, when they become successful, they become very, very, benevolent, and they start giving very heavy donations to their respective universities and colleges. As a result, American universities are very well funded, and they support lot of research. What happened during 1960 and 70, the decade is very important. Hundreds of universities in America were working on topics like the depletion of the ozone layer, global warming, loss of biodiversity, spreading desertization, and dangers posed by nuclear technology, that is, danger from nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs. These 5 critical areas received so much of focus that hundreds and thousands of articles started publishing, and they were published in the very many journals, and this became a hot topic not only for America, but for the entire northern world. When we say north, it is the industrial north. The northern industrialized countries started discussing these issues, and in America, the intellectuals among the American public, they started, social scientists, the concerned citizens of America, they started focusing, and they started, they were worried what was happening to the planet Earth, because as we know, the planet Earth has been described as Gaia, Gaia, and Gaia is a Greek word. The ancient Greeks worshipped the planet Earth as a living planet. This wonderful planet was affected because of the depletion of the ozone layer and increasing global warming and so on. So it was at this particular juncture, one environmental biologist by name Rachel Carson, Rachelcarson, she published a wonderful book known as The Silent Spring. And what is the Silent Spring? It's a book, as the very title indicates. Here the spring means not the natural spring which provides water, but the word spring here means the spring of life. Because the spring of life should be eternal, it should be continuous. But we humans inhabiting the earth today, we are making it increasingly difficult for life to continue to sustain itself. We are polluting the air, the water and the land. We are cutting off the forest area. We are destroying the biodiversity. We are making it extremely difficult for life to continue to sustain. That particular title, the book, became a bestseller in America. Bestseller means any book which sells in millions of copies. Not only, immediately a couple of months after it was first published, it went in for reprint, and reprints at several places. It was simultaneous publications of the book were taking place in not only in America, in Europe, and it was translated in nearly 30 languages of the world. And it appeared as if it was about to change the world. It was at this critical juncture that the United Nations, because that was the hot topic in America, all the newspapers wrote wonderfully about that particular book, The Silent Spring, and United Nations Security Council discussed the contents of the book, and they decided to organize what is known as the United Nations First Conference on Human Environment. And this was organized in the year 1972. It was organized in Stockholm, and the conference was inaugurated on June 5th. That is why every year on June 5th, the whole world observes World Environment Day. As teachers, when we teach this subject in the schools, we have to be very clear, because World Environment Day is observed in every school, in every city, village and town. And on that particular day, that is June 5th of every year, it is mostly the teachers who have to tell, who have to inform the society about the major problems faced by the planet Earth. This particular conference was something like a watershed in the development of the subject of environmental science. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, then Prime Minister of India, she gave the keynote address to the conference, and in that particular conference, Madam Gandhi spoke extensively about the close link between poverty and environmental destruction. But, she explained that the poor people throughout the world, unable to sustain their lives and not having anything else, they may fall on the natural environment. That is, they may go into the forest, cut down the trees. But Madam Gandhi was very, very clear when she mentioned that the capacity of the poor to destroy the environment is limited, because they are only individuals and they only have two hands, they don't have machinery. And therefore, the destruction caused by the poor to the natural environment is always in a limited sense. Greater damage has been done to the environment by a nexus of the rich and the powerful and the mighty and it is this group throughout the world. It's not just India. We are talking about the planet Earth. In every country, it is the most powerful people who come together to form a nexus, and it is they who are felling the trees with the help of latest machinery, sawmills, saw machines and so on. And sometimes when we look at the Amazon forest, we realize that in one day they can clear off hundreds of acres with the modern machinery that they have. And then those logs are taken, they are transported, and the whole area is burnt. Then naturally grass comes into being, and in the grasslands, in the such newly created grasslands, they go in for cattle ranching, and later on they feed the cattle into the slaughterhouses, into the automatic slaughterhouses, where the cattle are slaughtered and they produce burgers, and these burgers are sold to America and Europe. And when they get a few dollars, they think that is development. That is why, friends, the time has now come to define development. And this, Mrs. Gandhi was very, very clear that we just need not blame any section of the population, but the whole humanity need to come together and to make a clear-cut understanding of development. After the Prime Minister returned from that particular conference, that is Stockholm 1972, Madam Gandhi immediately established what is known as the Parliamentary Committee on Environment. And this committee was established basically in order to draft the Prevention of Water Pollution Bill. This committee initially was headed by very powerful and intellectual politicians like Mohan Daria and subsequently Krishnakant ji, and they made a wonderful legislation. They made a wonderful bill. It is known as the Prevention of Water Pollution Bill, which was enacted in 1974. This bill can be described as a determined effort on the part of the Government of India to take the message of protection of environment, to give it a shape and a meaning and also an institutional framework. Based on the provisions of this Prevention of Water Pollution Bill, pollution control boards came to be established in this country in the year 1976. The Central Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Board, all of them came into being in 1976. And 5 years later, the Government of India came up with the Prevention of Air Pollution Act. It is known as the Air Act of 1981. But in spite of the Water Act and the Air Act and the PCBs, what happened in Bhopal in 1984 is something very shocking. You know, Union Carbide, that world's worst industrial accident occurred in Bhopal. And in one night, more than 3,000 people died and more than 300,000 people were affected in so many ways. Their health became the concern of the Government of India. But this was the world's biggest industrial accident. It occurred in India, and India was not prepared for that. This what we call disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness was not there. We are not blaming anybody, but then there are limits and limits to newly emerging countries, and it is here that the government then came up with what is known as the Comprehensive Environment Protection Act. This act came into being in 1986, but unfortunately, to implement this particular act, Environment Protection Authority should have been created way back in 1987, but for reasons best known to the political system of India, this did not materialize. As a result, the country as a whole, India is the world's largest democracy, and yet we do not have a comprehensive environment protection authority. As a result, we the people in this country are suffering a lot. Now, in addition to this, simultaneously at the global level, there was a wonderful book that was published, and the name of the book is Limits to Growth. This was published by Dennis Meadows, and it was Club of Rome, you know, who put the money in it, and this book was made available to the world. It is in this particular book that for the first time the GDP was objectively analyzed, growth rates were analyzed, and the world was told that while calculating the growth rates of the nations, it is important that we take into consideration the depletion of natural resources and the increasing cost of pollution. Unfortunately, in spite of the fact that this particular book was published in 1972, in spite of the fact that this book was endorsed by the UNO, it is very unfortunate that the nations of the world have simply sought to ignore it. But anyway, United Nations on its own took a greater initiative and established what is known as the World Commission on Environment and Development. In short, it is known as WCED, and this was headed by Mrs. Gro Harlem Brundtland, then Prime Minister of Norway. This commission submitted its report after 4 years in 1987, and this report has been published in the form of a book, and the name of the book is Our Common Future. Now friends, as teachers, when we teach in the classroom, it's very important that we have to give the names of some of the best reports and commission reports or world-class books, and the contents of this report, you know, the chapterization and the contents of the report, they are accepted the world over. This report for the first time identified and agreed that the planet Earth was facing several problems, namely the depletion of the ozone layer, global warming, loss of biodiversity, spreading desertization, and the danger from nuclear reactors and bombs. But it did not stop with that. They went further, and they also came up with strategies to mitigate the problem, to address the issues. And it is there they have very clearly emphasized that organizing development. What should the governments in the world be doing in every country? So they made two things very important for the governments. Number one, that every government of every country, they have to take into consideration the rising aspirations of their teeming millions of people. A country like India, 1.25 billion, there in 125 crores, and every person has some expectation from the government. So we need to take into consideration their aspiration, their hopes and expectation. That is one thing. Second, the government has to convert these hopes and aspirations and expectations into relevant public policies. Public policy means governmental policies. And these governmental policies should be basically to address the problems of the poorest of the poor. It is very important. Otherwise, this is, we are a democracy. We cannot be organizing activity which doesn't have no meaning to the poorest of the poor. So, the essential needs of the poorest of the poor have got to be met. Now, I come to another important contribution of UNO, and that is in the year 2000, the United Nations, on the eve of the new millennium, they met and they explained very clearly the millennium must have certain goals, that is, and they said that from the year 2000 to 2015, that is the first 15 years of the new millennium, should be devoted to addressing and solving the basic minimum problems of the poorest of the poor in every country. What are these problems? Food is a major problem. The poor, to find 2 square meals a day for many in the third world countries, in Africa, in countries, even in India, there are many areas where food is a major problem. That is one. Housing is a major problem. Education is a major problem. Education should be so organized that not a single child should be left out. Every education should be uniform, compulsory for everybody, but then the government has to come up with innovative programs to ensure that every child comes into the classroom and no child is left out. One suggestion here, which is accepted in many countries, is the idea of a neighborhood school, What is a neighborhood school? In a neighborhood school, house numbers are allotted to a particular school in the neighborhood. Say, for example, 2000 houses or 3000 houses, depending upon the strength, the capacity of the school. And then it becomes the duty of the teachers of the school to, make a complete report of all the households, how many children are there, and to what extent they are going to the school. And it is the responsibility of the school to see that every child comes to the school. That is, the responsibility is fixed on the teachers and the school in the neighborhood, and that makes things very easy. In America, this is known as the school district. And suppose there is a school which is wonderful because the teachers are very hardworking and the results are excellent, then the property values in that school district go up because every parent would like to send their children to such a wonderful and successful school where serious education is given. The same methodology, slightly modified from country to country depending upon their resources, can be applied, and ultimate goal should be to see that every child gets education. That is where the role of the teacher is. Then we come to health. So, like this, they identified 8 major issues. In the case of health, the United Nations very clearly said that the family doctor concept, time-tested model of family doctor concept, that is, there was a time in this country when families used to have a doctor in the neighborhood. And for every small thing or big thing, the family members, the head of the family or somebody would be discussing their medical problems. And the doctor was almost like a member of the family in the neighborhood, in families in the neighborhood. And the doctor would reach out to the people, educate them, sensitize them, tell them about sanitation, how nicely they should wash their hands after they going to the washroom, and how, at the time of eating, or, everything should be, what should be their food. In addition to this, the medical profile of the family members will be recorded with the doctor. That is, the doctor would know in which house is what patient, a diabetes patient, a BP patient, or a cancer patient, or a leprosy patient, or, anything, even AIDS, a contagious, most dangerous diseases can be identified. And then the government is informed, and the government can quarantine and restrict that disease to that particular place itself, or depending upon the problem, the patient can be shifted and focused attention can be given. That is, in a country as vast as India and as highly populated as 1.25, the government has to be very, very vigilant. Otherwise, we can never say one deadly disease like bird flu or SARS or, malaria or plague or cholera or anything, gastritis can take a very heavy toll. So, the focus should be on preventive care rather than allow the people to get sick and then come to the hospital. Like this, United Nations has been working on identifying issues and conveying it to the nations of the world, helping them, guiding them, and ultimately prevailing on them to come up with policies and implement them sincerely. But unfortunately, what happened? In spite of the fact that the UN went to the extent of organizing the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in the year 1992, and this, as you all know, it was organized in Rio de Janeiro, popularly known as the Earth Summit. That is, it was the biggest conference ever organized by the UN on the subject of environment and development. And almost all the prime ministers and presidents of all the nations assembled there. They made tall promises and they pledged their commitment for sustainable development. But when they returned, when they went back to their respective countries, they did not follow it up, and they did not really live up to the tall promises they made. That is why we see that there is a very big gap between the promises made at an international conference and the performance of nation states. This gap has to be bridged. This gap has to be bridged because we are living in a very dangerous and delicate world. If something goes wrong, then it will affect many lives on this planet Earth. Friends, the World Commission report, while focusing on biodiversity and global warming and concentrating on climate change, they have very emphatically said that they are very real problems. In fact, the global community agreed that these problems are real, and the problems are, I'll come to the details just now. But then the United Nations on its part, it set up two basic protocols and placed it for the nations of the world to discuss. One is the what we call the protocol on biodiversity, and the other is on climate change. And since 1992, United Nations has been organizing conference of parties 1 year, alternately 1 year on biodiversity, the other year on climate change. It has been trying to bring the nations of the world together and, motivating them, guiding them, and trying to bring about a consensus which will be binding. However, I am very sorry to say that on the climate change, in spite of certain protocols signed earlier, it is very unfortunate that the nations of the world have gone back on their commitments, and today it appears as if we are back to square one. Similarly, on biodiversity, again we find that gap between the promise and the performance, and the nations are not all that serious to implement. The tragedy of these things can be sorted out in the days to come, but then coming to the countries like India, where we are now focusing, because it's a very important thing, we can't afford to waste time. 1.25 billion population, every family needs employment, their essential needs have to be fulfilled, but then there is a yawning gap between the power that is generated, electricity that is generated, and the electricity that is required. It is this critical area that we now need to focus. For example, India can be, we should be tapping the solar energy. By tapping solar energy, we can actually be, producing power in a decentralized way throughout the length and breadth of the country. That will reduce the cost of transmission of electricity. Every rooftop in this country can be producing power, solar power. And millions of jobs can be created overnight. Just as in the recent past, last 25, 30 years, we have noticed IT is changing the world. Even in India, millions of people are living on IT today. But then, IT is only a means towards an end. But the end is sustainable development. We need electricity, no doubt, but then we need to produce this electricity in a way which is not polluting. The existing sources of power generation, for example, thermal power. Thermal power, it is accepted that it is polluting, and oxides of nitrogen and carbon and sulfur, they are daily adding to the pollution load of the planet Earth. It's leading to global warming, thereby climate change is affected. Therefore, United Nations has already made it very clear that we need to find alternatives to this present module of generating, alternative to thermal power. In India, we have the new and renewable energy department, sources department. As teachers, we need to sensitize the students. We need to tell them that alternative energy sources are there: solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, hydel power, then tidal energy. In addition to these, we have bio energy. And now, throughout the world, a lot of research is going on, and it is hoped that very soon hydrogen would be a wonderful source of energy. Yes, we need power, we need electricity, but then we need it in a way which is safe, which is clean. That is why clean development mechanism is now being focused in all the countries of the world. Here I want to add one silent revolution which is actually changing the world. Now friends, there are, as per the World Watch Institute report 2007, the world has about 75,000 transnational corporations. These are very big corporates. Like for example, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, GE, and even in India we have the Tatas and the Birla Group, and like this. Approximately 2007, the figure was about 75,000. And these are transnational. They simultaneously operate in several countries. The budget of these transnational corporations is, some of these TNCs have budgets exceeding the total budget of a sovereign state. Many states do not have that kind of a budget. I am talking independent nations. But now there is a silent competition among the corporates. They are now compulsorily, they have realized that it is a mandate, that people in the world are sensitized, they are informed, they know that their activities have got to be clean. Therefore, there is a race among the corporates of the world to go in for clean development mechanism. That is, they will no doubt be manufacturing, but manufacturing, in the process of manufacturing, they will not be polluting. Here again the race has started. It is, that is leading to a lot of change, new inventions, new technologies are being developed, and using less electricity, burning less fuel, and the focus is on how to minimize the waste that is generated. The waste of one particular company can be utilized by another, and ultimately the focus right now is on waste minimization and on for clean development mechanism. So this aspect, because the corporates also have what is known as a corporate social responsibility. So friends, we need to realize, we need to tell the students that it is the responsibility of the government to protect the environment. Article 25A. Under the directive principles, it is a direction. The government has to do it. Again, it is our duty also. As citizens, it is our duty. We are all duty bound under the Constitution of India, Article 51 AG. Yes, it is the duty of every citizen. So, it is the duty of the government, it is the duty of the citizen. But just as it is our duty, it is also the duty of the big corporates. Nobody has a right to pollute. Nobody is above the government. And whoever pollutes will be, they can be prosecuted. The writing on the wall is very clear. That is the polluter pays principle. If a particular company pollutes, any citizen can go to a court, because that, if somebody is polluting a river, then the farmers who are utilizing that water for their livelihood of growing food, and the people who drink that water, because everybody, we need clean water. There is no other source but the river water. But if the river is polluted, then where do the people go? So when they have to fulfill their needs. Therefore, when they drink that water, if it is polluted, the cost of cleaning up of the river, the cost of cleaning up of the river should be, it is now Supreme Court has directed that the bill should be paid by the polluters. Whoever is the polluter will have to pay. And they will not just pay for the losses suffered by individuals. Now it is accepted that they will have to pay for restoring the ecosystem to its pristine purity, that is the river. For example, Ganga. River Ganga is our mother. It is the lifeline of this country. It is the most important, one of the most important rivers in the world, and in India it is the most important river. But what have we done to Ganga? So who has polluted? Hundreds of the industries and hundreds of cities on either side of Ganga. Right from Delhi to Banaras to every other city, hundreds and thousands of townships, they are all polluting. The sewage from the domestic, what we call from the cities, Untreated sewage is going into the river. Untreated industrial effluents are going into the river. And all the waste, the garbage, what we call, when it rains, everything is swept into the river and the rivers are getting silted up. So, and this is the price, the people in this country. As a result, today, the morbidity profile of the people in Punjab, Haryana, Delhi is changing very fast. More and more cancer patients are being identified, and they are, it's slowly, cancer is emerging as the #1 killer. The subject of environment, as we notice, is manifesting in different fields. Every field of human knowledge is right now connected to this subject. For example, geology. Today the subject is, connecting, and this subject in the days to come will be known as environmental geology, environmental biochemistry, environmental politics, environmental economics. That is, the subject of environment is actually influencing, it is connecting. In other words, we can say that different fields of knowledge are now compelled to connect this with this subject, and the subject is growing. There is a growing consensus throughout the world. Slowly, governments and people, citizens, corporates, everybody is inching towards sustainability of development. But meanwhile, there are hiccups, and these hiccups can be sorted out. For example, in India, the Supreme Court of India has played a crucial role. This we have to inform the students, because as and how they grow up, they need to realize their rights. Protection of environment it has always been a part of Indian culture. Protection of environment is our rich heritage, which we have inherited from our ancestors. We need to live in harmony with nature. We need to be kind with all, other animals, like, other wildlife, including the animals that are there in the birds and the insects, everything. We are not the only living beings who should be living on this planet Earth. Every form of life has a place. We have to recognize, we have to respect, and we have to cohabit with them. The Supreme Court, having realized its own bounden duty, one of the most spectacular judgments of the Supreme Court is, it has been given in the Dehradun quarrying case. In Dehradun area, when quarrying was taking place at a very rapid pace, and the contractors and builders and vested interests, they were quarrying left and right and devastating the valley. The matter, when it came up, thanks to MC Mehta initiative, Supreme Court observed that protection of environment is not only the duty of the Supreme Court of India, but it can be viewed as part of the right to life. Every citizen has a right to life, right? To protect, that means in order to live the totality of whatever his lifespan is, right to clean surroundings then becomes fundamental. It becomes essential for right to life. For the first time, the Supreme Court in the entire world, it made it very clear, yes, not only we have right to life, but to ensure that we live to our full length, it is important that we have a right to clean surroundings. For example, a middle class family with great difficulty, they build a home, and after 5 years a deadly polluting toxic industry comes up in the neighborhood, and definitely that particular family cannot live with a poisonous industry just besides it. Industries we need industries, but then they need to come up at the right place. That is why the whole of India, we should prepare a master plan, and we have to identify areas where industries can come up. There should not, once the master plan is ready, there should never be any changes. Not even the highest authority in the country should have the power to change the land use pattern. This has been very clearly said in so many judgments of the Supreme Court. In what is known as in a Ratlam, in a municipality in Madhya Pradesh, known as Ratlam municipality. For the first time, Supreme Court of India very emphatically emphasized the role of public interest litigation and said the Supreme Court has the right to intervene if things are not happening the way they ought to happen. So, to protect the fundamental right of the people to live in a healthy environment, the Supreme Court stepped in, and after that there was no looking back. Supreme Court went on going to the rescue of the people of this country. In Delhi, the oleum gas leak, automobile pollution case, shifting of industries. There are so many cases, where Mr. Mehta played a crucial role thanks to Justice Bhagwati and several other judges. Justice Kuldeep Singh was always known as the green judge of the Supreme Court. Like this, a lot of judges, they played a wonderful role. They gave landmark judgments, and because of these landmark judgments, a lot of things are happening, including the very fact that environment as a subject should be taught in the right from KG to PG and beyond. The Government of India has been trying to do justice to the subject of environment. At the same time, they were also trying to implement the Millennium Development Goals. For example, the recent legislations that have taken place in this country, including constitutional amendments like the fundamental right to education, and then the right to information, then right to food security. And at the same time, that massive housing scheme that has been launched in this country, in the nook and corner, providing that every poor man shall have, poor family shall have a shelter. But while doing these things, it's important that every activity should be environment friendly. That is, in other words, we need to incorporate elements of sustainability at every level, at every action, not only of the government, of the people, by the people, and also the corporates. We need to, every action of everyone. That is what the United Nations recently they have been telling, that they have appealed to the nations of the world not only to speed up the implementation of Millennium Development Goals, but while implementing, they are insisting that the implementation process should take into consideration the sustainability aspect. That is why Millennium Development Goals by 2015, that is next year, they will have to be known as the Sustainable Development Goals, and the world is working on it. That is, in other words, the UN is making it very easy for the nations of the world to ensure that development becomes sustainable. While this is very appreciative, there are some difficulties for the UN. The United Nations is a global organization. It came into being in 1945, immediately after the Second World War. Initially, they were focusing on preventing another war, but gradually they started focusing on issues like human rights and subsequently environment. Their contribution is marvelous. However, there are some real difficulties even for the United Nations. For example, not only it is the UN which is taking action through its various UN agencies, there are a lot of multilateral agreements between nations. For example, India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, like that between China, Japan, Japan and America, like throughout the world, between whenever, between the nations, lot of agreements are entered into. Recently, it has been evaluated that there are 600 multilateral environmental agreements entered into between the nations of the world. Now, the problem is, okay, it is their sovereign right, 2 nations, 3 nations can always come together. For example, SAARC countries or NATO countries, they can always come together. They can be discussing, or group of 77, like this it goes on. But the basic issue is that these decisions should conform to the consensus arrived at the global level. They cannot be incompatibility. Compatibility throughout the world, all the multilateral environmental agreement, they should only reflect the aspirations or agreements entered into by the UN. This is one major difficulty, and the United Nations has actually expressed it. And they are insisting that the nations of the world should not be creating problems to the global, what we call general will that has arrived, that is actually changing the world for the better. There are some difficulties also. These global UN organizations are not in a single place. That is, in other words, they are not in New York City, where the UN headquarters is located. They are scattered in Montreal, in Nairobi, in Bonn, in Switzerland, in Germany and other places, including some of the organizations are in India also. It is UN is functioning in a very scattered way on different topics, and it said no doubt they are doing wonderful work, but there is no coordination. And this was felt, and similarly duplication of men and material is taking place, because whatever limited resources UN has, they will have to pass on so many agencies, and they are located in different continents and they are not working together. Taking stock of its performance, United Nations has initiated reforms, and these reforms are basically, it was felt that the world requires global environmental code, one single code for the whole world, because today environmental degradation in one country or environmental accident in one country is affecting the well-being in other countries. For example, Fukushima, definitely it has affected parts of China and Russia. Similarly, we have so many pollution of one river is affecting downstream. In Africa, we have the river Nile, one of the very powerful rivers, very lengthy, very wonderful. It is the lifeline of the northeastern part of Africa. But then there is always interstate water problems. Suppose the northern countries try to harvest the water, the protest will come from those countries which are already benefiting, for example, Egypt. But water is required by every country. Every farmer needs water, every citizen needs water, everybody's right. They have a right, and it's a human right. That is why there should be a court at the international level, like the World Trade Organization, to address these interstate disputes on the subject of environment. It could be pollution, like Chernobyl accident affected, right from Chernobyl to Iceland. Radiation traces were there in all the countries. Similarly, this is very important, and I think United Nations has taken it up very seriously, and we are hoping that in the next 2-3 years it will happen. Another thing is, we have global commons. We have wonderful oceans. This is a beautiful planet. We have so many areas which are common to all the countries. All the oceans are common to everybody. These are known as the global commons. The North Pole, the South Pole, they are the heritage of the entire world. Everybody has a stake in it. But then, what is it? Suppose one particular country attempts to destroy the public commons, the global commons, then definitely there should be a remedy somewhere. That is why United Nations is now thinking of creating another trusteeship council. This trusteeship council shall take into consideration the common, what we call the global common areas, like all the oceans. The health of the ocean is very important. The poorest of the poor fishermen who live on the coastlines of the world, for them going into the ocean to take their daily catch, that is very important. Their livelihood is dependent on them. For them, the ocean is their like their mother, and mother takes care of the nutritional needs of the child. Therefore, they should this court, which court plus trusteeship council, I am sure they will take care. They will be a reality in the days to come. One more aspect, we have, whenever in any country, whenever there is human rights violation, United Nations steps in. But it is now conceived, it is now proposed that the UN shall step in whenever there is environmental violation. That is why they want to have another organization known as the Global Environmental Organization, which will take care of the environmental scenario throughout the world. This is not the only thing. In every country, governance is now increasingly coming into focus. Throughout the world, there is a movement in favor of the empowerment of the people. Democracy is the urge, it is the hope of humanity. Like what we witnessed, the Jasmine Revolution in Egypt, in other countries. Many, the rising aspirations of the teeming millions of people in the world, they are hoping that as we go into the future, their real problems will be addressed. There will be more transparency, more accountability, and the whole world is moving in that direction. Keeping that in mind, it is now proposed to make the theme environment, development, but a third angle also is added, and that is democracy. It is now a triad. All these years, the whole subject was revolving around environment and development. But the third aspect also is democracy is important. So, protecting the rights of the people, ensuring their needs and accountability, transparency. The world is trying to rectify governance in several countries. In India too, there is a big debate and a demand by the people of this country to take up initiatives and to follow and see that the United Nations guidelines and directions are implemented. India is a major partner of the UN, and whenever we talk about UN having done this work and that work, it means that India is part of it, and therefore India's duty, moral duty and responsibility to see that the initiatives taken up by the UN must be sincerely implemented here. And Government of India has taken up some measures, definitely, for example, the recent Food Security Bill and the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. It is nothing but it is actually providing, right to work, ensuring that people have work, and the government also has been ensuring that there is food available at a cheaper price, at a reasonable price. All this is definitely trying to implement the Millennium Development Goals, but at the global level, UN is going a little further because it has to move very fast. The problem is overtaking. Be face to face with a major crisis. That is the reason 2015 is going to be very crucial for the planet Earth. That is the reason the world is in a hurry to define development. And 2015 and thereafter, automatically environment will be the only the subject will be in much greater focus. Friends, this we are discussing, and as teachers it is your responsibility to sensitize the students, and wherever possible the teacher should connect with the villages or in the mohallas wherever they are working. If they are working in an urban area, they should connect to the people. And the teacher is not just a teacher for the classroom. The teacher is a teacher for a society, for the entire society. Sensitizing the people, motivating them, helping them, guiding them is it is the prime task of a teacher. And this should happen globally. Everywhere in the United States, UK, in Europe, in Africa, everywhere things are changing. The teacher is becoming increasingly, important, and through him, the message for the protection of the planet Earth it reaches out every household. Ultimately, people's participation is very important. UN may have decided an agenda, Government of India may have taken the initiative, state governments may be, following it up, but sometimes the bureaucratic cooperation may not be there, and of course, in certain countries, corruption is there. As a result of this, even the good intentions of UN do not really percolate down. That is where the teacher has to play a corrective role in a gentle manner, without distancing anybody, without isolating anyone, a positive role where they can really, be partners, helping the UN, the government, and the people, and ultimately work. The whole humanity should work in the direction of sustainability of development. As we realize this, the United Nations reforms, particularly in governance, are going to result in reforms in every country. In India, the government of India is very much concerned. We have centers for good governance in Hyderabad, and such centers of good governance are coming up in every state. And very soon, the entire administration will become, it's hoped in another 2 years, 3 years, everything will be transparent, and people will know what's happening, what is being conceived, what is being promoted in the name of development. Then they should be able to ask the right kind of questions. Environmental impact assessment should not be or naam ke vaste or namesake type. It should be real. They have to take into consideration the rich flora and fauna and the plight of the people, the culture of the people. It's a horrible thing for any family to be displaced. When displacement takes place, the family has to be compensated properly. All these and many more are actually happening in every country. Governments are moving in the direction of closer cooperation, and it is expected that in maybe another 2-3 years time, the world will be a much better place to live.